What do you do when you need something small casting, but you don't have the equipment? Hey guys, that's probably the most common question I get asked, and the answer is simple. You outsource. But what if you can't find anywhere locally to cast your creations? Well, I've been negotiating with RioGrande in the US for a while, and they manufacture bespoke jewellery for some very big names. Typically, they do not offer casting services to the general public, but amazingly, I've managed to change their minds for my viewers. So wherever you are in the world, you can have your items professionally cast by RioGrande, and they'll post them back to you. To prove how the concept works, I decided to have a bash at making a character ring. This skull was my starting point, and it's something I already had on hand from a previous project. I got an idea in my head for a zombie ring, but the actual creation took several weeks. Luckily for you, you only get the highlights. I'm using ZBRUSH. As you guys know, it's my favourite sculpting software, but there are other free options out there, such as Blender. I picked up my ZBRUSH knowledge from the ZBRUSH Jewellery Workshop, which is a 24/7 online membership stroke tutorial service which I've reviewed with you guys before. And frankly, I'm glad I did. We all get stuck and need advice at times, especially when we're doing something new. And I'd like to thank Thomas, Eric, Tony and Henry, who all helped me by giving invaluable guidance through online critiques. And before any of you suggest that I'm receiving special treatment, I'll quickly point out that these critiques are available for free to every ZBJW member. It's incredible how talking to an industry expert can really change your perspective on things. Anyway, I eventually reached this point and, after a little more critique, had the courage to commit a little further and came up with this. No one gave me this idea of a graveyard, but I can certainly say their support and encouragement helped inspire it. He's not having a very good apocalypse so far. Someone's bitten off half of his nose and someone else has ripped away a lot of the flesh from the left side of his face. But he's staying positive and has just one thing on his mind: juicy brains. Now that I had my ring design, I just needed to get it cast professionally. And this is how you'd go about it if you wanted to do the same thing. If you check in the description, you'll see a link to a form. Please don't abuse this link. These are busy guys, so only use this if you're serious about placing an order. So let's go through the form so there are no surprises. Date is obvious, just choose today's date. Name should be obvious to you. Do you have a RioGrande account? If you filled out this form before and placed an order, then the chances are you will have a customer account number, in which case you'd click yes and provide your account number. But in most cases, I think this will be no, so we'll leave it unchecked. The email address must be a working email, as this is how they'll contact you. Include your full postal address, including your country. Remember that postal charges come into play here. Phone number again is critical information. If they need to get in touch with you quickly, there's no better way. Metal type is your preference. I'll go with silver. Quantity is obvious and I'll just choose one. Stone setting is something you might personally want. You can purchase gems directly from Rio and they will set them in your designs. If you're having a ring made, then do put down the size here. If you're not 100% sure about the sizing, and I'll admit in my case I'm not 100% sure how the US system works, make a note in the comment section below about the internal diameter of your ring. I'll try and hunt out a ring size guide and include that in the description for you. Finishing gives you the opportunity to save a little money and do a little bit of the work yourself, if that's your thing. A raw casting is just that, clipped from the sprue and sent to you without any polishing or cleanup. Ground means a good spin in a metal polisher with metal pins. You've probably already seen me using a magnetic polisher. This will remove any oxidization and prepare the surface for fine polishing. Mass finish is pretty much the same thing. It's a spin in a tumbler, but with a variety of different media. This is not an option that you'll likely need, but there are occasions when it can come in useful to get the best from your piece, and upon seeing your design, Rio will advise you about that. But for now, don't select it. Hand polishing is what most of us will probably want. This is polishing to a finished level by the skilled hands of an expert. I'll certainly be selecting that. Rhodium plating and flash plating can come into play depending on your choice of metal, and again, Rio will advise you if that's necessary, so I'll ignore it here. Lastly comes oxidized, and that's the nice blackening that you often see in recesses. This works great on silver, for example, so it's perfect for my zombie. Laser engraving gives you the option of having a message or date etched professionally somewhere on the piece, but for me that's a no. The quality mark is the stamping of the digits associated with the metal, like 925 for sterling silver. You can choose where you'd like this mark to appear, and Rio will do their best to accommodate. The hallmark is something you might want. You can use Rio's recognised stamp, or if you have your own professional hallmark, you can have Rio use that instead. Uploading the file is again obvious. Just make sure you've done your homework first. Rio will expect a finished file from you. They don't design it, that's your job. So try to get the sizing right and use a standard format like OBJ or STL. Intellectual property rights. Now this effectively is Rio covering their legal backsides, and who can blame them? Here they are asking if you have legal permission to reproduce this item. Obviously, if you created it, then all intellectual property rights belong to you. But maybe you downloaded something that you found online, such as a ring on Thingiverse or whatever. As long as you have legal permission to use this work in this manner, you're fine and you can say yes. But if you haven't, don't click this. If you do and someone somewhere wants to sue, it won't be RioGrande in court, it will be you. So make sure you do this right. Now if your file is too large to upload, you can provide Rio with a direct link here. You might want to store it on your Google Drive or what have you, and give Rio the exact location. Finally comes comments, and don't skimp on this. These guys aren't mind readers, so if you want something specific, tell them here. If you want something engraving, here's where you'd say what it is. If you want gems, tell them the sort and the size that you're after. It's also well worthwhile making a note of the dimensions, just in case. Rio regularly get models that are incorrectly sized. If you tell them what size you want, they'll do their best to help, but if you don't, it's your fault what you end up with. So use this comment section wisely and help Rio to help you. I personally always like to receive a copy of everything that I send out, so I'll click this and enter an email address. After that, it's just a matter of sending the form, waiting to get a quote, and then choosing whether or not to go ahead and pay. RioGrande very kindly filmed a lot of the processes involved in the making of my ring, and I think it's great to see how the pros do it, so let's have a look. This is a 3D print made using the SolidScape system, I believe. This is a very expensive system, not for the amateur or even the small business. The print is covered by wax supports, which is why it looks so strange. The plate is heated gently to release the prints. The print is then suspended in a warm solvent that dissolves the outer wax to reveal the actual castable print. Now that is a very nice looking print. Here they're adding a sprue and making a casting tree. Here's the plaster slurry being added to a flask. This is then vibrated and vacuumed. Here's the silver grain being added to the crucible, which is part of a very fancy vacuum injection machine. And now you can see the silver melting until it's so molten and reflective, it looks like water. The hot flask is added. Now watch. That's the silver being sucked from the crucible and injected into the flask, all done by vacuum. The hot flask is plunged into water. And note that unlike me, Rio doesn't have anything living in their plunge bucket. Now that's what you call a really classy outfit. A high pressure water blast cleans away most of the plaster, and I'm guessing a sonic bath does the rest. Here's a magnetic polisher like you've seen me use. These do a great job of removing oxidization and preparing the piece for final polishing. Adding the oxidization really does make the detail pop. And a final polish in skilled hands. Now that, I think you'll agree, was some amazing work. The piece looks fabulous. And here it is. From my mind and my PC to RioGrande in the States, and finally into my hands thanks to the postal service. I can't tell you how satisfying this is. I've never pretended to be anything other than an amateur metal caster, so to have a piece made by professionals feels fantastic. And believe me, it shows in the fine textual details which my printers and casting skills just can't capture. The cost of this service varies, of course, from piece to piece, depending on size, complexity, materials, etc. There's a lot of silver here. It's a heavy piece, and this cost me $150, which for a door-to-door professional service is frankly amazing. So if you do have something that you want casting, now you have a way of achieving it and getting the professional results your creations deserve. However, please note there's a limited number of slots available each calendar month, as RioGrande are doing me a massive favour in making this service available to you guys. And also, for much the same reason, don't expect overnight results. We're talking weeks rather than days, so you can always check with Rio if time is an important factor to you. Plan ahead if you're working to a deadline, and if you're not, remember your items are being processed in a busy, highly skilled, professional environment, and perfection takes time. Now, I do have one more piece of exciting news. Whilst in the process of critiquing my work, the guys at ZBJW fell in love with my zombie too. It's his personality. He's a great little chap. I've taken to calling him the optimistic zombie. Anyway, they very kindly invited me to sell my ring on their new web store. There's very little there yet, as it's so new, but it's an honour to be asked, and so if you fancy buying him, there's a link in the description. The price isn't dirt cheap, but he's solid sterling silver and not a mass-produced item. But all prices here are fair, basically just production costs and a little margin for profit. And that ends this epic video. If you want your creations professionally made, you now have a way to reliably achieve this. And from time to time, I can see me using this service myself. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to drop me a line. So that's it for this video, guys. Take care and thanks for watching.